Hey folks, hope you all are doing well. I'm Karan Bandal from Economist Site, and in this video, let's talk about what may be causing China's global dominance to wane. China's meteoric rise has been nothing but spectacular over the last few decades. China has been on the upswing of a super cycle that saw an almost uninterrupted expansion of countries' capacity to manufacture, appetite to consume, and ability to project power across the world economy. The CCP, that is Chinese Communist Party, relentlessly pursued economic development over all else, and in doing so made several debilitating policy mistakes that we'll talk about in a minute. President Xi has shifted the CCP's prime objective though to national security and prioritized it over the economy. Getting rich isn't China's big project anymore, it is power. So why some experts believe China's global dominance is over? Number one, a spent economic system. The Chinese economy has been bending under the weight of its structural problems for almost a decade now. It begins with the country's real estate market or property sector. Its importance cannot be overstated. For starters, GFCA for asset creation, which includes property, makes up 42% of China's GDP, way more than the global average. Now zoom in on property. China's residential property sector contributes an estimated 25 to 30% to its GDP. For comparison, the same sector contributes just about 5% to the United States GDP. Real estate is not only the biggest source of wealth for Chinese households, but also the mechanism through which local governments are financed. These local governments in China, instead of collecting property taxes to pay for basic social services like fixing roads and paying out pensions, the municipalities sell large swaths of land to property developers and use that as revenue. So if the property development activity takes a hit, revenues for the local governments take a hit. And look at the plunge in real estate activity, negative 35%. That is severe. Big cities like Beijing and Shanghai might still be okay. The bigger problem is Chinese property firms did the most building in tier 3 cities where people aren't as wealthy. In tier 2 and tier 3 cities, prices have fallen by as much as 50%. This is where you will find China's infamous ghost towns. To state the problem in one sentence, China has a population of 1.4 billion, but it has built housing for a population of 3 billion. It's not that China did not try to fix this problem. Worried that the sector would implode, Beijing attempted on multiple occasions to limit the loans or credit that was fueling the bubble. But because real estate played such a vital role as a funding mechanism for local governments, China had to keep building. Authorities did not want to change the way local governments funded themselves, nor did they allow Chinese household finances to crumble. Authorities could not let the property prices fall. They appear to be stuck. This system, supported by speculation and easy money, is now starting to break down. Country Garden, China's largest real estate developer, is on the brink of collapse. Another property giant, the Evergrande Group, that defaulted on its debt about 2 years ago, filed for bankruptcy protection in the US court. The country's massive, opaque shadow banking sector, which served as the backbone for, guess what? The real estate boom, is also under pressure. At least one money manager, Zhongrong Trust, managing $87 billion in assets, skipped payments to investors this summer. With so many developers defaulting, consumers are questioning whether or not they should prepay for an apartment. Before, there used to be a rush to get in because property prices only went up. But now, the urgency to buy has vanished and consumers are waiting, putting the whole property-driven growth model at risk. Number two, little fires everywhere all at once. While the rest of the world is battling inflation, China still is in deflationary mode. July and August inflation readings were abysmal, showing an overall lack of domestic demand. China's debt is almost 3 times its GDP, which makes it very difficult for a government to issue any kind of stimulus to kickstart the demand. Another key pillar of the economy, exports, which make up 40% of the country's GDP growth, hit their lowest level in 3 years in July. Overall, it is estimated that China's exports will shrink by 8% this year. What's even more worrying is that experts assess this weakness is not just the result of a cyclical downturn. It's part of a more permanent shift caused by the trade tensions with Europe and the United States. With global firms turning away from China and Chinese consumers getting anxious about shrinking growth and employment, China risks setting off a vicious, self-reinforcing cycle that keeps investment out and spending low. Finally, number 3, lack of intent. There's too much for the CCP to do and not enough money, time, or even intent to do it. Allowing a property market correction, bailing out local governments and creating a new funding mechanism for them, developing a social safety net for people through all this instability. All these potential solutions cost money. And even if capital were there, pointing to over $3 trillion of foreign exchange reserves that China has, policymakers fear what this disruption could do to their grip on power. Plus, Beijing may need to conserve firepower for other concerns coming down the pipeline. In the long term, the CCP has to worry about China's demographics. Let's not even talk about that catastrophe. Uncertainty surrounding the economy is so severe now that the wealthy in China are turning to an underground network to secretly move cash out of the country. China imposes steep barriers against moving one's own capital out of the country, and attempts to circumvent these rules may attract fines worth 30% or more of the amount being transferred. In some cases, serious jail time is also a risk. Yet the demand for these unofficial channels to move money out is growing. The size of these channels isn't known for sure, but a 2021 report points to an operation that spanned about $10 billion in assets spread over 5 organizations and 8,000 banks. What's more, to rely on this system, individuals risk associating themselves with criminal groups. There are about 6.2 million Chinese who have assets worth more than $1 million. In the next 2 years, it is expected that more than 700,000 Chinese people will emigrate, and money worth $150 billion is expected to exit the country just this year. The new reality is, as experts state, all the policies are now determined by President Xi himself, and his priorities are spending money to engage in a technology and national security race with the United States, not economic. Once upon a time, China used to spend big on infrastructure, but now it's the military. US government estimates put China's annual defense budget at about $700 billion, blowing past the independent estimates of $290 billion and just shy of what the United States itself spends on defense. It's time to imagine a future where China does not become rich but may remain powerful, building its army and continuing to develop its domestic technological capabilities. China's neighbors, including India, need to be ready, as China may get more aggressive and assertive in the near future. It will be interesting to see what Chinese policymakers come up with to lift the spirits of an embattled Chinese economy, that is, if President Xi allows them to. I hope you found this analysis interesting. I'll speak with you again next week. Until then, take care.